And in fact, it was deeply hypocritical because it occurred in the same kind of mini-budget that occurred at a time when, in fact, what happened in the United Kingdom under their financial reforms, they in fact lowered the amount or cost on those with larger emitting cars. What I can tell the member is the government is continuing to work on the issue, and we're looking to try and get a resolution which will be successful to the matter.
Order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order. The honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Seek leave of the House to table 3 documents. Shall I take them one at a time? The first one is the editorial from the Dominion Post that says that they hoped that Mr Key was more compelling behind closed doors than he was in the public.
Is there any objection to that document being tabled? There is objection.
Mr Speaker, the second is a letter from former President of the National Party, Sue Wood, outlining the case for Tom McNichol, who of course has lost $10 million in the reversal of the government's decision on
Is there any objection to that document being tabled? There is no objection to that document being tabled.
Mr Speaker, the third document is the New Zealand Energy and Environment Business Week, which sets out that the government's actions has lost $400 million worth of
Is there any
projects.
objection to that document being tabled? There is objection. We come now to question number 6.
Mr Speaker.
Jeanette Fitzsimons.
My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, when does his government expect to pass an amendment to the ETS legislation delaying its implementation as agreed to in the National Act Confidence and Supply Agreement?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Agreed with the ACT Party, the government has moved to set up a special select committee to review the emissions trading scheme and related matters. This week, legislation will be debated in the House to repeal the ban on thermal generation. The government has committed, as I said earlier, to amending the emissions trading scheme legislation by no later than 30th of September 2009.
Supplementary.
Jeanette Fitzsimons.
Is the Prime Minister saying that he doesn't intend to legislate at this stage to put the emissions trading scheme on hold, and yet that is what he has told foresters he's doing? And if that's the case, does he mean that foresters will still be able to claim credits in January for carbon sequestered during 2008 in their post-1989 forests as provided for in the Act?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I haven't had any direct conversation with foresters. What I have pointed out is that the only element that's going to be affected, actually, by the no element will be currently affected by the emissions trading scheme legislation because effectively it doesn't begin until 2010 when stationary energy comes into the scheme. Now, it would be the government's intention that the high-level select committee will have met, the revised legislation would have been passed by the 30th of September, and on that basis the matter would have been cleared up before any elements come into the emissions trading scheme that could be used to offset with the forestry sector.
Chris Okenvoll.
Mr Speaker, to the Prime Minister. Has the Prime Minister received any reports which indicate the need to be cautious in the implementation of an emissions trading scheme?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, I have. The Australian Government yesterday released its white paper on the proposed carbon pollution reduction scheme. As I've said many times previously, we need to make sure that New Zealand's measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are aligned as appropriate and with those in Australia.
The Honourable Pete Hodson.
Mr Speaker, when the Prime Minister said in question 5 that we needed to balance environmental action against economic opportunity, does this mean that the default position in his thinking is that all other things being equal, assertive climate change action is economically deleterious?
Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, what the member can rest assured is that we intend to take a balanced approach to climate change and to our economic responsibilities. We're not going to export jobs, nor are we going to go around the countryside, as that member did when he was a minister, and tell New Zealanders that they were about to earn $500 million off the Kyoto Protocol, when in fact it's now costing them a sum equivalent to that.
Jeanette Fitzsimons.
With regard to those parts of the emissions trading scheme that came into force on the 1st of January 2008 relating to forestry, will he or will he not put on hold the penalty regime for deforestation during 2008 and the credits that foresters are expecting to claim in January 2009 for the carbon sequestered by their forests this year?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the current legislation and rules around deforestation stay in place pending the outcome of the Select Committee.
Jeanette Fitzsimons.
In that case, what precisely is he suspending or putting on hold, given that nothing else is due to come in until 2010 and he's retaining the parts that are already in force? Or is he actually saying that the forestry bit may be taken out of force later, which means they'll have to give their credits back?
Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
That is exactly the point. Nothing's coming in until 2010 outside of forestry. The high-level Select Committee will have reported back, and it's the hope of the government that the legislation that will replace the existing ETS will be in place long before January 2010.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Did the Prime Minister just suggest then that this is all smoke and mirrors and he's not doing anything, he's not suspending anything?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's nothing smoke and mirrors about reviewing the ETS legislation. What we intend to do is pass legislation that balances our environmental responsibility with our economic opportunities. We'll do so in a way that will put some clarity in the legislation, and actually we'll do so in a way that works, which is a whole lot better than the climate change policy his previous government had.
Supplementary.
Order. Could I just check with the Honourable Member, was it a supplementary or point of order?
A supplementary.
Supplementary. Jeanette Fitzsimons.
What reports has the Prime Minister received from Mr Grosser in Poznan on how our Kyoto partners have received the news that New Zealand is reviewing or suspending the ETS, has cancelled plans to make sustainable biofuels in New Zealand, has cancelled its preference for renewable electricity, has cancelled its Green Homes Insulation Fund, and gets its police to spy on organisations campaigning for a responsible attitude to climate change? And has anyone in Poznan given New Zealand the Fossil of the Year award yet?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, well, I'm not sure the Sunday Star Times has made it all the way to Poland yet, but putting that to one side, our partners will be looking at New Zealand, I suspect, in exactly the same way that they reviewed what came out of Australia yesterday, which was a very considered and balanced approach to climate change.
House now comes to question 7.
Mr. Speaker.
Jonathan Young.
Mr. Speaker, a question to the Minister of Housing, please. What reports has he seen on the status of New Zealand's housing stock?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr. Speaker, to answer the member, the briefing to the incoming Minister from Housing New Zealand revealed, and I quote from the first page, it is estimated about $2 billion is required to address the deferred maintenance and upgrade and modernise state houses to an appropriate